Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Let's dive right into it. Alright, so Jedi, Psychers, Mages and Mystics, the Soviets, and Yuri from Command & Conquer. All throughout sci-fi and fantasy, we have variations of the ability to influence people's minds. Whether it's straight up mind control, spells, suggestion, illusion, a full-blown takeover. A lot of sci-fi and fantasy have different ways they go about portraying these abilities. And they're all pretty recognizable. I think mind influence and mind control have been pretty mainstream for a good long while now, so we can recognize these pretty readily when they're used, which takes out a huge chunk of exposition and for the story to have to explain things. Now, all of these, at their baseline, they take away a person's autonomy, their free will, their agency. And those people all have their actions and thoughts now dictated by a completely separate individual. And one of my favorite versions of this is actually from an anime called Code Geass. It's mind control in the form of the Geass power, each variant of it being kind of different, but the power that we see with the main character, Lelouch v. Britannia, is the Geass power of the king, and he can use it to command anyone he makes eye contact with to do one thing, absolutely no questions asked. Now he uses that power to get information, to compel people to rebel against the government, to get people to fight and kill their comrades, or to follow him completely and obey absolutely. Now it's one of my favorites because it is an absolute power that comes with stipulations established in the show. The power itself has maybe a 20-foot radius range. He has to be in eye contact with the person. It can't be through sunglasses or a helmet. And it can only be used on that person once. So it's got some limitations. And with those limitations come a great amount of strategy, because you have to be exceptionally careful with who you use it on and how. Because once you use it, it's done. You can't use it on the same person again. So, say you're trying to use it on somebody to let you into a building. So they take out their keys, they open the building, they let you in. Well, then later on you're in a predicament, you need to be hidden somewhere, and you come across that same person. Well, you can't compel them anymore. So, yeah, you want to do as much on your own as possible and use this power very sparingly. And Lelouch was trying to bring down an empire that spanned a whole third of the planet, so yeah, he certainly needed to apply some serious strategy and tactics in using this particular version of mind bending. But another thing that Code Geass did was introduce the conversation of ethics of using this power, the power of the king. Lelouch himself quandaries about how he should use his unasked for abilities. He wasn't born with them, he didn't ask for them, he entered into this contract with a witch, and yeah, he did that to save his life and the life of a friend of his. Now, instead of just commanding everybody to be his slaves, which he can do, Lelouch elects to go a more just and moral route of things, which unfortunately is plagued by war and death. So that's a conversation I think you could work into any of the franchises that deal with mind manipulation. It's very lightly touched on in Star Wars, but clearly the Jedi are the good guys. They're 1,000% okay with mind tricks. Even if it's just to get somebody to go home and rethink their life when they're out selling death sticks, But it's very much taboo in other franchises like Star Trek or Doctor Who. But in Warhammer 40,000, where anything goes, mind control is probably the least harmful thing that could be done to you. But in our world, where we have more fleshed out schools of ethics and never-ending developing questions in the areas of morality, we would certainly have to answer to how, why, and when you should be able to use mind tricks on people. And this could be anything from the classic, these aren't the droids you're looking for, to just casting whole illusions that cloud people's minds completely. Now, the two main schools of ethics that we humans use here on Earth are utilitarianism, basically doing the most good for the most amount of people while not perpetuating evils in order to do it, and Kantianism, which, in a nutshell, is considering an action and if we would be able to live in a world where everyone is allowed to do that same action, like lying, stealing, killing, or helping people, giving someone a book out of charity, that kind of thing. You could plug any action into there. But Kantianism wants you to answer the question, would you be okay with everyone in the world doing X, Y, or Z? So looking at mind tricks through the lens of utilitarianism, we get a few questions about our mind tricks that we can answer pretty easily, and this would inform us whether or not using them would be ethically moral or not. So, I want to mind trick someone in order to obtain a good or service for free, let's say. So you'd basically be, what you would basically be doing is taking away a person's free will in order to steal. Now, obviously, this sounds terrible, and it objectively makes the people doing this the bad guys. Certainly to the everyman who these mind tricks are being done to, they're straight up evil. In some very arguable manner, these actions could even be described as those of demons. In a way, it very much reminds me of blood bending from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where we can see certain waterbenders who control water in people's blood and literally bend those people to their will. So with utilitarianism, me using my Jedi powers or my blood bending abilities to control someone in order for me to get a good or service for free, I am clearly not doing the most good for the most people, and I'm certainly perpetuating evils to do it. Now, it's hurting whoever I'm stealing from. It's not doing any favors for me, for my own moral compass, because it's steering me ever closer to being okay with more and more heinous acts of villainy. And this is a pretty low-stakes situation, so it's only going to get worse from here, right? If I influence someone's mind to, say, kill their comrades, to shut down a shield generator, ensuring the deaths of thousands, or, to giving me some command codes or security clearances so I can use them towards some acts that Some may even rightly so call acts of terror. Now, if those acts of terrorism end up in, let's say, the blowing up of the Death Star, or the ability to eliminate the Borg cubes that are coming at us, or routing the tides of orcs that will wash over the Imperium, if our mind tricks can accomplish things towards that end, then the calculus becomes much more obvious. But then we have some really strict parameters in which we can use our superior abilities to bend people's minds to our will. So, with utilitarianism, mind tricks kind of fail the morality check here. Because how often are we going to have an end goal that's that big, that saves humanity, or that saves the galaxy at large? Now, with Kantianism, this particular school of ethics revolves more around duty rather than justifying ends by way of the means. As a matter of fact, it instructs us to not use either ourselves or other people as a mere means to accomplish an end goal at all, no matter what the good may result from it. So I think it's pretty safe to say that we could not use people as mere means to accomplish some very petty ends. I think we all agree on that. But in regards to what's known as the ultimate maxim, the measure by which we judge an action, which I alluded to earlier, are we okay in living in a world where people use mind tricks in order to save lives by, let's say, releasing innocent people from prison, or having a major city official overturn a law that blatantly oppresses people? Things like this are actions I think we could all agree that we would be okay if everyone in the world had the ability to do this, and they in fact did do it. The converse of this would be, say, do I want to use this power in order to kill a man in order to take his lunch? Well, then I would have to be okay living in a world where everybody could use mind tricks in order to kill people to take their lunch. And obviously, I wouldn't. I don't think anyone else would either, because then everyone on the world would die very quickly, and no one would have lunch. So, with both measures of ethics, I think you have to use these powers with the ultimate goal in mind, and certainly not towards anything less. And the Jedi partially do this, right? I mean, they aren't bowing up to the Trade Federation or the Separatist worlds and Jedi mind tricking them into joining the Republic or having them stand down their forces, because they would be taking away those individuals' free agencies. Though, in all fairness, the argument can be made that the Jedi had a greater responsibility and a duty to save lives. So they almost had an obligation to bend these people's minds towards that ultimate end. And in fact, the argument could continue to say that it would be irresponsible if they didn't mind trick those individuals, and that every life lost from there on by those individuals' troops is now at the Jedi's feet. We've heard the same argument in our own real-world history, in fact, during World War II, whenever we made the decision to drop nuclear bombs on Japan. But the Jedi seem to be really hung up on that bit of Kantianism that demands that we not use people as a mere means to an end, rather than also counterbalancing with the usage of the ultimate maxim to avoid prolonged war and death. And I'm really focusing in on the Jedi mind tricks here because they're probably the most basic form of what we're talking about with influencing people's minds and wills towards ends not their own. If it just gets... things get way worse from here, especially when we bring in the likes of Yuri and his mind control devices from Command & Conquer. One of the best game franchises ever, by the way. Or Psychers in service to the Imperium of Man and Warhammer 40,000. I think if these powers existed in our own world today, they would certainly be used for some pretty heinous acts. Safe to say. Just tons of evil. Barely any good at all. I think it's a form of absolute power. And, of course, there's that old saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely. But I'm also reminded of something that clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson said in reference to a biblical quote saying that the meek shall inherit the earth. He said a better translation would be, those who have swords and know how to wield them, but keep them sheathed, will rule the world. Now, for the layman, let's say that you own all the nuclear weapons in the world and you control them, absolutely, but you don't use them, right? You kind of hold the world hostage just by owning them, owning the launch codes, right? The world's peoples basically have to do whatever you say, right? I mean, that's how the major powers of the world have kind of held this very shaky Cold War style peace, is the promise of mutual destruction. Now, this is a pretty crude and raw interpretation, but it gets the idea across. So maybe the people that deserve ultimate power are the ones that can have it and simply decide not to use it for their utmost potential, like the Jedi. So, yeah, Jedi are the good guys. I mean, what are you gonna do? They have all of this power and they don't use it. So, are mind tricks ethically sound? I would say yes, if and only if they are in service to a goal for the greater good of all. If it's anything less, then we are dangerously close to turning people into mindless, witless slaves that aren't even aware of what they are doing in order to accomplish short-term petty ends. Or you could just be a Sith, not have any ethical qualms or moral quandaries. None of that is needed in the teachings of the Sith or the Imperium, for that matter. Yeah, but that is all the time I had for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stick around for more Sci-Fi Unchained. But for now, live long and prosper, my friends, and may the Force be with us all.